Some nights don't change your life, they erase it completely. Emily Carter gripped the steering wheel as rain hammered her windshield, each drop exploding under the glow of distant streetlights, turning the empty parking lot into a blur of silver and shadow, her headlights cutting through the storm while her 6-year-old son Liam slept in the back seat, his small chest rising and falling under a worn blanket, unaware that everything was about to break. She had just finished a double shift, her body aching, her mind numb, thinking only about getting home. About warm leftovers and maybe 4 hours of sleep, when movement caught her eye near the far corner of the lot, something wrong, something out of place, and she slowed without thinking, her breath catching as shapes emerged from the rain, men in dark coats, one standing too still, another shifting like he was waiting for something irreversible. Emily should have driven away, every instinct told her to, but her foot hovered over the brake instead, frozen by something she couldn't explain, and then it happened, quick, quiet, final in a way that made her stomach drop, the kind of moment that didn't belong in her world, the kind that left no room for misunderstanding. Her pulse roared in her ears, drowning out the storm, and just as she sucked in a breath to reverse, the man in the center lifted his head and looked straight at her, not past her, not through her, at her, like he knew she was there. Like he had been waiting for her to see. Something small slipped from his hand, arcing through the rain, striking the front of her car with a soft, hollow tap before sliding down out of sight, and Emily's fingers tightened around the wheel as panic surged sharp and immediate. Her body finally remembering how to move, she shifted into reverse too fast, tires skidding slightly on wet pavement, heart slamming against her ribs, but before she could turn, the group shifted, parting just enough for one man to step forward from the shadows, and everything in her went still again. He didn't rush, didn't raise his voice, didn't need to, because the space around him seemed to belong to him entirely, like even the storm knew better than to interfere, his dark coat untouched by the chaos, his presence controlled, deliberate, dangerous in a way that didn't need to prove itself. His eyes found hers through the rain-streaked glass, sharp and unreadable, and Emily felt it, something cold, something certain, something that said running wouldn't be enough this time. He stopped a few feet from her car, close enough that she could see the faint reflection of her own fear in his gaze, and when he spoke, his voice was low, steady, cutting through the storm like it had been waiting for silence that didn't exist. "You shouldn't be here," he said, not accusing, not surprised, just stating a fact that landed heavier than anything else that night, and then his eyes flicked briefly toward the hood of her car before returning to her, sharper now, more focused. "Give me what he threw, and I'll keep you safe." Emily did not move, not at first, her hands locked around the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles burned, her breath shallow as the man's words settled over her like something heavier than fear, something final. The rain kept falling, loud, relentless, but inside the car it felt muted, like the world had narrowed to just him standing there and the faint shape of her son in the rearview mirror, still asleep, still safe for now. "I do not have anything," she said, her voice barely steady, shaking in a way she could not hide, and she hated that he could probably hear it, could probably feel it, because everything about him suggested he noticed things people tried to hide. His expression did not change, not even a flicker, just that same calm focus as his gaze drifted again toward the front of her car, then back to her, slower this time, more certain. "You do," he said quietly, stepping closer, close enough now that she could see the rain sliding off the edge of his coat without ever seeming to touch him, like even the storm refused to disturb him. "And you do not understand what it is yet." Emily swallowed hard, her mind racing, replaying the moment over and over, the man's eyes, the small object hitting her car, the way it disappeared out of sight, and suddenly the space between her ribs tightened. Whatever it was still there. Her instinct screamed to deny it, to reverse the car and drive until the city lights disappeared behind her, but something in his voice, in the way he stood there so certain she would not run, made her hesitate just long enough for doubt to creep in. Behind him, the other men had gone still, watching, waiting, but none of them spoke, none of them moved without his permission, and that told her more than anything else could. He was the one they listened to, he was the one they feared. "Please," she said, her voice breaking now despite her effort to stay in control, "I have a child in the car." For the first time, something shifted in his eyes. Not softness, not quite, but awareness, like a new variable had entered the equation. His gaze flicked briefly to the back seat, just a glance, just enough to confirm what she said, and when he looked back at her, his tone lowered, quieter but somehow more intense. Then you should understand exactly how serious this is, he said, each word deliberate, measured, because the people who lost that tonight will not stop looking, and they will not ask questions the way I am asking now. Emily's chest tightened, panic rising sharp and fast, because she believed him. She did not want to, but she did, and that was the worst part. He was not threatening her, not in the way she expected. He was telling her the truth. Her eyes darted toward the hood of the car, toward where the object must have fallen, invisible from where she sat, but suddenly heavier than anything else in the world. What is it? She whispered, almost to herself. His jaw tightened slightly, the first real sign of tension she had seen, and for a brief second, she wondered if he did not fully know either. Something that should not be in your hands, he answered, his voice quieter now, closer, as if the storm itself might be listening. Something that makes you a target the moment you keep it. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears, her thoughts colliding, and behind her, Liam shifted slightly in his sleep, a soft movement that snapped something inside her into place. This was no longer just about her. Her fingers loosened from the wheel just enough for her to reach toward the door handle, not opening it yet, just holding it, caught between fear and something worse than fear, the realization that staying inside the car would not protect her anymore. Outside, he waited. Unmoving, patient in a way that made it clear he was not going anywhere, and when he spoke again, it was softer than before, but it carried more weight than anything he had said yet. Step out, Adrian Moretti said, his eyes never leaving hers, and let me keep you safe. Emily opened the door before she could change her mind, the cold rain hitting her instantly, soaking through her thin jacket as her shoes touched the slick pavement, and for a second she almost turned back, almost grabbed Liam and drove without looking behind her, but Adrian did not step aside, did not raise his voice, he just watched her like he already knew she would not run. The air felt different outside the car, heavier, sharper, every sound too loud, every movement too close, and Emily wrapped her arms around herself as if that could hold her together. Do not come any closer, she said quickly, her voice trembling despite the effort to steady it, and he stopped exactly where he was, not out of obedience, but control, the kind that made it clear he chose every step he took. Then do not give me a reason to, he replied calmly, his gaze dropping briefly toward the front of her car again, then lifting back to her face. Waiting, Emily followed his glance, her heart pounding as she moved slowly along the side of the car, each step uncertain, the rain blurring her vision, her mind racing with questions she did not have answers to, until she reached the front and saw it, a small black object resting near the edge of the hood where it had caught between the metal and the windshield, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Her breath caught as she reached for it, her fingers hovering for a moment before touching it, as if it might burn her, but it did not. It was cold, solid, lighter than she expected, and the second it settled in her palm, something shifted inside her, something real, something dangerous. Behind her, Adrian's voice came again, quieter now, closer without him moving. That does not belong to you. Emily turned slowly, holding the object instinctively against her chest, her pulse racing as a new fear replaced the old one, sharper, more personal. Because now she understood, whatever this was, it had chosen her, or had been forced into her life without permission. What is it? She asked again, stronger this time, her voice steadier because she needed answers more than she feared him. Adrian studied her for a long second, his expression unreadable, and then something in his posture shifted, not softer, not safer, but more deliberate, as if he had made a decision. It is the reason you cannot go home tonight, he said, each word measured, leaving no room for argument, and the reason those men will not stop looking for you. Emily's stomach dropped, her thoughts instantly jumping to Liam, to the quiet rise and fall of his breathing in the back seat, to how small he looked compared to everything happening around them. I am not part of this, she said quickly, shaking her head, stepping back without realizing it. I did not ask for this, no one ever does, Adrian replied, and for the first time there was something almost human in his voice. Something tired beneath the control, but it disappeared as quickly as it came, replaced again by certainty. But you are part of it now. A sudden sound cut through the rain, distant but wrong, not loud, not obvious, just enough to make Adrian's head turn slightly, his attention shifting for a fraction of a second. and that was all it took for the atmosphere to change, the tension tightening, the air growing colder. His eyes snapped back to Emily, sharper now, more urgent than before. And when he spoke again, the calm was still there, but something else had layered beneath it, something faster, something final. "Get your son," he said quietly, his tone leaving no space for hesitation. "We are out of time." Emily froze, her heart slamming against her ribs, because this was the moment she had been trying to avoid, the moment where there was no safe choice left, only a decision that would change everything. And as she looked at him, really looked at him, she realized something that made her breath catch. He was not asking anymore, he was already deciding for her. Emily did not argue this time, her body already moving before her mind could catch up, driven by something deeper than fear, something instinctive, because when he said they were out of time, she believed him. She turned and rushed back to the car, her hands shaking as she pulled the back door open, the sound louder than it should have been, sharp against the rhythm of the rain, and Liam stirred immediately, his small voice soft and confused. "Mom, hey, baby, it is okay," she whispered quickly, forcing calm into her tone as she reached for him, brushing damp hair from his forehead, her heart breaking at how unaware he was, how normal this moment should have been. "We just need to go, all right?" Liam blinked up at her, still half asleep, trusting without question as he wrapped his arms around her neck, and that trust hit harder than anything else that night. Emily lifted him carefully, holding him close against her chest, feeling the warmth of him through the cold rain, grounding her just enough to move. When she turned back, Adrian was already closer, not rushing, but not distant anymore either, his presence filling the space between them like something unavoidable. One of the black SUVs had rolled forward silently behind him, its engine low, its doors opening before she even reached it, as if the decision had already been made long before she understood she was part of it. "I am not going with you," she said, even as her feet carried her toward him, the words weak against the reality unfolding around her. Adrian's gaze dropped briefly to Liam, then returned to her, steady, unshaken. "You already are," he said, his voice calm, not forcing, not threatening, just stating something that felt terrifying because it was true. Emily hesitated at the open door, the interior of the vehicle dark, unknown, everything in her screaming to step back, to refuse, but behind her the parking lot no longer felt empty, no longer felt safe, and that small sound from before came again, closer now, enough to make her shoulders tense. Adrian stepped closer then, just enough that she could feel the shift in the air, not touching her, not crowding her, but near enough to make one thing clear: there was no time left for hesitation. "Look at me," he said quietly, and she did, because something in his voice made it impossible not to. "If you stay, they will find you," he continued, his tone low, controlled, each word deliberate. "If you come with me, you live." Emily's breath caught, her grip tightening on Liam as his small hand clutched at her jacket, and for a moment everything slowed, the rain, the noise, the fear, all of it narrowing down to a single choice she did not want to make. She searched his face for something, anything that felt like a lie, but there was none, just certainty, just control, just a man who knew exactly how this would end. Behind him, the men remained silent, waiting, watching, their stillness somehow louder than movement. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, because that question mattered, because she needed it to matter. Adrian held her gaze for a long second, something unreadable flickering in his eyes before it disappeared again, replaced by that same calm authority. "Because you are holding something that belongs to me," he said, and then, after a pause that felt heavier than anything else, softer, almost like a truth he did not intend to reveal, "and because you have a child." The answer hit her in two different ways at once, one cold, one unexpectedly human, and before she could decide which one mattered more, he stepped back slightly, giving her just enough space to choose, even though they both knew she already had. Emily looked down at Liam, at his sleepy eyes and quiet trust, and then back at the dark interior of the SUV, and without another word, she stepped inside, crossing a line she could never uncross, the door closing behind her with a soft, final sound that seemed to echo louder than the storm outside. The door sealed with a soft click, but to Emily it sounded louder than anything she had heard that night, final in a way that made her chest tighten as the world outside blurred behind tinted glass, the rain reduced to distant streaks that no longer touched her, and for a brief second, she wondered if she had just traded one danger for another. Liam shifted in her arms, his small fingers curling into her jacket as he blinked awake. Confusion replacing sleep. "Mom, where are we going?" Emily swallowed hard, forcing a steady breath she did not feel, brushing his hair back gently. "Just a drive, baby, go back to sleep," she whispered, though her voice carried a tension she could not hide. The engine hummed beneath them, low and controlled, and without any visible signal, the vehicle began to move, smooth and silent as it pulled away from the only life she had known, leaving the empty parking lot behind like it had never existed. Across from her, Adrian sat with the same stillness he carried outside, his posture relaxed but precise, his eyes watching her in a way that made her feel seen and measured at the same time, not like prey, not like a stranger, but like something that now belonged inside his world whether she accepted it or not. Emily tightened her hold on the small object still pressed against her chest, suddenly aware of its weight, of how everything seemed to revolve around it, and she shifted slightly, angling her body away from him without thinking. His gaze dropped to her hand instantly, catching the movement, and when he spoke, his voice was quieter than before, controlled but closer now that there was no storm to carry it away. "You should not hold it like that," he said. Emily's eyes snapped back to his, defensive despite herself. "Why not?" A brief pause, just long enough to make her heart beat harder, before he answered, "Because if something happens, you will not let it go, and that will make it worse." The words settled heavily between them, not a warning, not exactly, but something more certain, and Emily felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain still clinging to her clothes. "Then tell me what it is," she pressed, her voice low but stronger now, because sitting in silence felt worse than knowing. Adrian leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable, his fingers resting loosely against his knee like everything about this moment was under his control. "Information," he said finally, "the kind people build empires on and destroy each other for." Emily's stomach dropped, her grip tightening despite his warning, her mind racing with possibilities she did not understand. "I do not want it," she said quickly, almost desperately. "Take it," for the first time. Something like irritation flickered in his eyes, gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced again by calm. "If it were that simple, you would not be here." The car turned sharply then, the motion subtle but enough to make Emily glance toward the window, the city lights shifting into unfamiliar streets, darker, quieter, the kind of places she had never needed to know before. Her pulse quickened again as the realization settled in deeper. She did not know where they were going, she did not know how far this would go, and there was no one she could call, no one who could help. Liam shifted again, settling against her shoulder, his breathing evening out as sleep pulled him back under, and Emily closed her eyes for a brief second, pressing her cheek against his hair, grounding herself in the only thing that still felt real. When she opened them again, Adrian was still watching her, not impatient, not forcing conversation, just waiting, as if he understood that this moment mattered more than anything he could say. "If I try to leave?" she asked quietly, not looking away this time. "What happens?" Adrian held her gaze without hesitation, his voice steady, absolute. "You will not make it very far." The answer was not cruel, not threatening, just honest in a way that made her chest tighten again, and before she could respond, he added, softer now, almost like a promise rather than a warning, "But as long as you stay with me, nothing touches you." Emily felt that settle somewhere deeper than fear, heavier than logic, and she did not know if that made it better or worse, only that she had already crossed a line she could not step back from, and somewhere ahead in the dark, whatever waited for them was already moving closer. The silence inside the SUV stretched longer than Emily expected, heavy but controlled, like even the air followed his rules, and she realized with a quiet, sinking certainty that this was his world now, not hers. The city outside kept moving, streetlights sliding across the tinted windows in slow patterns, but inside, everything felt paused, contained, as if nothing unpredictable was allowed to exist within reach of him. Emily adjusted Liam slightly in her arms, careful not to wake him, her fingers brushing against the small object still pressed against her chest, and the more she held it, the more it felt like it was pulling her deeper into something she did not understand. "Where are you taking us?" she asked finally, her voice quieter than before, not as sharp, not as defensive, but not trusting either. Adrian did not answer right away, his gaze shifting briefly toward the passing streets, calculating something she could not see, before returning to her. "Somewhere they cannot reach you." he said simply. Emily let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding, her eyes narrowing slightly. You keep saying that like it is guaranteed. A faint, almost imperceptible shift touched his expression, not quite a smile, not quite anything she could name. It is, he replied, with a certainty that made it sound less like confidence and more like fact. Emily shook her head slightly, her grip tightening again around the object. You talk like you control everything. Adrian leaned back a fraction, his eyes never leaving her. I control enough. The answer was not reassuring, but it was honest in a way that made it harder to argue. The car slowed then, turning off the main road into a quieter street lined with tall trees and iron gates that rose out of the darkness like something out of another world. And Emily felt her chest tighten again as the SUV approached a set of massive gates that opened before the car even came to a full stop, as if they had been expecting him, as if everything here moved ahead of his arrival. They passed through without hesitation, the gates closing silently behind them, cutting off the outside world in a way that made Emily's stomach drop, because now there was no easy way back. This is where you live, she asked, her voice softer now, almost disbelieving as the long driveway stretched ahead, leading toward a structure that slowly emerged from the darkness, large, still, imposing without needing to show it. It is where you will stay. Adrian corrected, his tone calm but final. Emily felt that settled deeper than anything he had said before, not because of the words themselves, but because of how easily he said them, like it was already decided. The car came to a smooth stop beneath a covered entrance, and before Emily could react, the door beside her opened from the outside, a man in a dark suit stepping back respectfully, his posture straight, his eyes briefly scanning her and Liam before lowering again. Emily hesitated, her instincts pulling in two directions at once, one telling her to stay inside, to hold on to the small space that still felt like hers, the other reminding her that she had already crossed that line. Adrian stepped out first, his presence shifting the entire space the moment his feet touched the ground. And then he turned back toward her, extending his hand, not forcing, not rushing, just waiting. Come, he said quietly. Emily looked at his hand, then at Liam, then back at him, her heart pounding as the weight of everything pressed in at once, and slowly, carefully, she stepped out of the car, not taking his hand, but not pulling away either, and as soon as her feet touched the ground, she felt it again, that shift, that invisible boundary closing around her. Adrian studied her for a brief second, then nodded slightly, as if acknowledging a decision she had not spoken out loud, before turning toward the entrance. From this moment on, he said, his voice low but carrying clearly in the still night air, you do not leave without me. Emily felt those words settle somewhere deep, heavier than fear, heavier than doubt, and as she followed him inside, she realized with a quiet, undeniable clarity that whatever this place was, whatever he was, her life outside those gates had already started to disappear. The moment Emily stepped inside, the world changed again, quieter this time but heavier, the kind of silence that did not come from peace but from control, and she felt it immediately in the way her footsteps echoed softly against polished floors, in the way the air smelled clean and distant, like nothing here had ever been rushed or uncertain. Liam stirred in her arms, his small fingers tightening briefly before relaxing again, and Emily adjusted her hold on him instinctively, grounding herself in the steady rhythm of his breathing while her eyes moved carefully around the space. Everything was larger than it should have been, higher ceilings, wider hallways, walls lined with artwork she did not recognize but somehow understood was expensive, untouched, like a place built to impress and protect at the same time. Adrian walked ahead without looking back, but she noticed how every person they passed seemed to step aside before he even reached them, heads lowering slightly, voices dropping to nothing, as if his presence alone reshaped the room. Emily followed a step behind, not because she trusted him, but because she had no other direction left to take, and the realization settled deeper with each step. They moved through the main hall and into a quieter corridor, the light softer here, the atmosphere less imposing but no less controlled, until Adrian stopped in front of a door and turned to face her again. For a brief second, the distance between them felt smaller, more personal, and Emily straightened instinctively, her grip tightening around the small object still hidden in her hand. His eyes flicked to it immediately, catching the movement without effort, and then back to her face. You are still holding it, he said. Emily hesitated, then slowly lowered her hand, not offering it. Not yet, you said I would not Understand it. Adrian studied her for a moment, something unreadable passing through his expression before it settled again into calm. I said it does not belong to you, he corrected quietly. Emily's jaw tightened slightly, the first spark of resistance pushing through the fear. Then explain it to me, she said, her voice steadier now, because standing here, inside his world, she needed something that felt like control. Adrian stepped closer, not invading her space, but near enough that his presence filled it completely, his voice lowering as if the walls themselves might listen. It is a key, he said, not to a place, but to information someone died to protect, and someone else is willing to do anything to retrieve. The words sank in slowly, heavier than she expected, and Emily felt her pulse quicken again, her mind struggling to catch up to something that suddenly felt much bigger than her, much bigger than tonight. Then why do you want it? She asked quietly. Adrian's gaze held hers, steady, unflinching. Because it was taken from me. The answer landed between them, simple but loaded with something deeper she could not fully see, and for the first time, Emily realized this was not just about protection, not just about her being in the wrong place at the wrong time, it was something personal to him. Before she could respond, the door beside them opened, revealing a softly lit room beyond, warm in contrast to everything outside it, and Adrian stepped aside slightly, giving her space to enter. You will stay here, he said, his tone firm but not unkind. You and your son will be safe. Emily hesitated at the threshold, her eyes moving from the room to him again, searching for something she could trust, something she could hold on to in all of this uncertainty, and she found nothing clear, nothing simple, only that same steady certainty that had followed her since the parking lot. Slowly, she stepped inside, carrying Liam with her, and as the door closed behind them, she felt it again, that quiet, final shift, like another piece of her old life had just been left on the other side, out of reach, replaced by something she did not yet understand but could no longer avoid. Emily stood still for a moment after the door closed, the quiet inside the room pressing in around her in a way that felt almost unreal compared to the storm and tension she had just left behind, and for the first time since everything began, there were no eyes watching her, no immediate pressure forcing her next move, just silence and the soft, steady breathing of Liam against her shoulder. She moved slowly, carefully, crossing the room as if it might disappear beneath her feet, her shoes sinking slightly into the thick carpet, her gaze taking in the details without fully processing them, the large bed, the warm lighting, the clean lines that spoke of comfort but felt foreign, like something borrowed from another life. She lowered Liam gently onto the bed, brushing his hair back as he shifted, his small hand reaching for her instinctively before settling again, and that simple movement pulled something tight in her chest. A reminder of why she had stepped into this place, why she had not run when she still could. Emily sat beside him for a moment, her hand resting lightly on his back, grounding herself in the rhythm of his breathing, and only then did she allow her attention to return to the object still in her hand. It felt heavier now, not physically, but in what it meant, in what Adrian had said, and slowly, cautiously, she turned it over in her fingers, studying it under the soft light, looking for something, anything that would make sense of it. It was small, unremarkable at first glance, something that could be overlooked easily, and yet it had shifted everything, had brought her here, into a world she did not belong to. A quiet knock broke the silence, soft but deliberate, and Emily's head snapped toward the door, her body tensing instantly as the fragile sense of isolation shattered. Yes, she called, her voice lower than she intended. The door opened slowly, and Adrian stepped inside without hesitation. His presence filling the room just as it had everywhere else, controlled, certain, as if even this space answered to him. Emily stood instinctively, placing herself slightly between him and the bed without thinking, the movement small but clear, and his eyes caught it immediately, lingering there for a brief second before shifting back to her face. He is asleep, he observed quietly. Emily nodded once, her grip tightening around the object again. For now, Adrian stepped further into the room, stopping at a respectful distance, not approaching the bed, not crossing the invisible line she had drawn, and for a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence stretching between them, heavier than before. You should rest, he said finally, his tone calm but firm, like a suggestion that was not entirely optional. Emily let out a small breath, shaking her head slightly. I do not think I can. His gaze held hers, steady, assessing, and then it shifted again to the object in her hand, sharper, Now, more focused. Then give it to me, he said, extending his hand, palm open, waiting. Emily hesitated, her fingers tightening instinctively, her mind racing with everything he had told her, everything she did not understand, and something inside her resisted, not out of defiance, but out of fear of losing the only leverage she had without even realizing she had it. You said it makes me a target, she said slowly, her voice steady despite the tension in her chest, so why would I hand it over without knowing what happens next? Adrian did not lower his hand, did not push, he just watched her, something unreadable flickering behind his calm exterior, and for a brief second, the balance between them shifted, subtle but real, because keeping it does not protect you, he replied quietly, it only delays what comes after. Emily met his gaze, her heart pounding, her thoughts colliding, and for the first time since she stepped into his world, she realized something that made her breath catch. He needed it, not just wanted it, needed it, and that changed everything. The room felt smaller suddenly, the silence sharper, and as she held the object tighter, she understood that whatever happened next would not just be about survival anymore, it would be about choice. Emily did not move, her fingers still wrapped around the small object as if letting go would mean losing more than just a piece of metal or plastic, as if it would mean giving up the only control she had left in a situation that had stripped everything else away. Adrian's hand remained extended between them, steady, patient, not forcing the decision, but not withdrawing either, and the space between them felt tighter now, heavier with something unspoken. You said it was taken from you, Emily said slowly, her voice low but firm, her eyes locked on his, so tell me what happens when you get it back. Adrian's expression did not change, but something shifted behind his eyes, something sharper, more focused, as if her question mattered more than she realized. For a moment, he said nothing, and that silence spoke louder than anything else, because it was not hesitation, it was calculation. It ends something that should not have started, he answered finally, his voice even, controlled. But there was an edge beneath it now, something personal, something that made Emily's chest tighten. She shook her head slightly, her grip tightening instinctively. That is not an answer. Adrian lowered his hand then, slowly, deliberately, not in defeat, but in acknowledgement of the line she had drawn, and for the first time, the balance between them shifted again, not entirely in her favor, but no longer entirely in his. You are asking for guarantees that do not exist, he said quietly, his gaze steady on hers, but I can give you one truth. Emily held his stare, her heart pounding, waiting. With it, he continued, his eyes flicking briefly to her hand before returning to her face, you are a target to everyone who wants what it contains, not just me. The words settled heavily in the room, and Emily felt the weight of them sink deeper than anything he had said before, because this was not just about him anymore, it was bigger, wider, something she could not see but was already part of. She glanced down at the object for a brief second, then back at him, her voice quieter now, but stronger in a different way, and without it, Adrian took a step closer, not enough to invade her space, but enough to make his presence felt more clearly, his voice lowering as he answered, without it, you are still connected to the moment you should not have witnessed, and that does not disappear. Emily's breath caught, her thoughts racing, trying to find a way out of something that seemed to close in no matter which direction she looked. Behind her, Liam shifted slightly on the bed, a soft movement that pulled her attention for just a second, reminding her again what mattered most, what she could not risk. When she looked back at Adrian, something inside her had changed, not gone, not resolved, but steadied in a way that surprised even her. Then I keep it, she said quietly, the words leaving her mouth before she could question them, her fingers tightening around the object as if sealing the decision. Adrian went still, not reacting immediately, his eyes searching her face as if measuring the weight of what she had just said. The silence stretched again, but this time it felt different, less controlled, more uncertain, and for the first time since she met him, Emily saw something shift in him that was not planned, not calculated. That is not a decision you understand yet, he said finally, his voice lower now, quieter, but carrying more weight than before. Emily met his gaze without backing down, her pulse racing but her voice steady. Then help me understand it. Adrian studied her for a long moment, and then something changed in his expression, not softened, not weakened, but adjusted, like he had just reconsidered something important. If you keep it, he said slowly, each word deliberate, then you do not just stay here for protection. Emily's chest tightened, her grip on the object unwavering as she waited for him to finish. His eyes held hers, unflinching, and when he spoke again, the calm certainty had returned, stronger than before. "You stay because you are part of this now." The words settled between them, final, unavoidable, and in that moment, Emily realized the choice she had made was not about keeping something in her hand. It was about stepping deeper into a world she had never meant to enter, and there was no path back that looked the same as the one she had left behind. The silence that followed her decision did not break, it shifted, tightening in a way that made the room feel smaller, as if the walls themselves were listening, and Emily felt it immediately in the way Adrian's gaze changed, no longer just observing, but recalculating. He took a slow breath, barely noticeable, and for a moment it seemed like he was about to speak, then stopped, as if choosing his next words mattered more than anything else. "You think keeping it gives you control," he said finally, his voice quieter now, more precise, "but it only ties you closer to what is coming." Emily did not look away, her fingers still wrapped firmly around the object, the edges pressing into her palm like a reminder that this was real, that none of this could be undone. "Then tell me what is coming," she replied, her voice steady, even though her heart was anything but. Adrian studied her, really studied her this time, like he was trying to understand something beyond the situation, something about her, and that look unsettled her more than any threat could have. "Someone inside my world made a mistake," he said slowly, each word deliberate, "and they tried to hide it using something they thought I would never trace back to them." Emily's breath caught slightly, her mind catching on to the implication before she fully understood it. "And now I have it," she said quietly. Adrian nodded once, a small movement that carried more weight than anything else. "And now you do." The room felt colder suddenly, even though nothing had changed, and Emily's thoughts raced, trying to piece together something that made sense, something that gave her a way out, but every path led back to the same place, to him, to this house, to the object in her hand. "So this is not just about protection," she said, her voice softer now, more measured. "It is about trust." Adrian's expression shifted slightly, not enough to soften, but enough to acknowledge the truth in her words. "It is about knowing who stands where when it matters." Emily exhaled slowly, her grip loosening just enough to feel the weight of the object without clinging to it, and for a brief second, doubt crept in, sharp and sudden, because she was standing in a room with a man who controlled everything around him, and she was choosing to stand against that control with nothing but instinct. Behind her, Liam stirred again, a quiet sound that grounded her instantly, reminding her why she could not afford to be wrong. She looked back at Adrian, her eyes sharper now, more certain. "Then you do not need just the object," she said, "you need me to understand it too." The words landed between them, and this time, Adrian did not respond right away. Something in his posture shifted, not tension, not resistance, but recognition, like she had just said something he had not expected her to see so quickly. "You are not as far outside this as you think," he said quietly. Emily held his gaze, not backing down. "Then stop treating me like I am." The silence stretched again, but this time it felt different, balanced, like something had changed between them, something small but important. Adrian took a step back, creating space where there had been pressure, and when he spoke again, his voice carried that same calm authority, but there was something else beneath it now, something closer to agreement than command. "You will learn what you are holding," he said, "but not tonight." Emily felt the tension in her chest shift, not easing, but redirecting, because that answer did not end anything, it only moved it forward. "And until then," she asked quietly. Adrian's eyes held hers, steady, certain. "Until then, you stay where I can see you." The words settled between them, not a threat, not a promise, but something in between, something that made it clear this was no longer just about keeping her alive, it was about keeping her close. Emily looked down at the object one more time, then back at him, and for the first time since this began, she understood something that changed everything. She was no longer just being protected, she was being kept, and the difference between those two things was something she had not yet decided if she feared or needed. Emily did not answer right away, his words settling into something deeper than fear, something that lingered beneath the surface and refused to fade, because being kept meant something different than being safe, and she could feel that difference even if she could not fully define it yet. She shifted slightly, glancing back at Liam, his small form still curled into the bed, unaware of the quiet shift happening just a few feet away. And that sight anchored her again, reminded her that every choice she made now carried weight beyond herself. When she looked back at Adrian, her expression had changed, not softer, not trusting, but clearer, like she had stepped into the reality of what this was becoming. "You are not just protecting me," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tension in her chest, "you are making sure I do not leave." Adrian did not deny it, did not look away, and that alone confirmed more than any explanation could have. "Those two things are not separate right now," he replied, his tone calm, controlled, but not dismissive. Emily let out a slow breath, her fingers relaxing slightly around the object as she considered his words. Not accepting them, but understanding them in a way that unsettled her. "Then what happens when this is over?" she asked, the question coming out before she could stop it, because it mattered, because she needed to know if there was an end to this that did not trap her here. Adrian's gaze held hers for a long second, and for the first time, there was something in his expression that felt almost distant. Like the answer was not as simple as everything else he had said. "That depends on how it ends," he said finally, his voice quieter now, less certain in a way that made her chest tighten. Emily nodded slightly, not because she liked the answer, but because she recognized it for what it was, the closest thing to honesty she was going to get. The silence returned again, but it no longer felt as heavy as before. It had shifted into something else, something more balanced. As if the space between them had changed in a way neither of them had planned. Adrian moved toward the door then, his presence pulling away from the center of the room, and Emily felt it immediately, the pressure easing just enough to let her breathe more freely, but not disappearing entirely. His hand paused on the door, and without turning fully back, he spoke again, his voice low but clear. "No one comes in here without my permission." Emily watched him, her expression unreadable. "And if I try to leave?" He turned his head slightly, just enough for his eyes to meet hers again, steady, unshaken. "You will not get far." The words were familiar now, but they carried a different weight in this space, quieter, more contained, like a rule rather than a warning. Emily held his gaze for a moment longer, then nodded once, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. Because she understood the boundaries now, even if she had not chosen them. Adrian studied her for a brief second, as if confirming something silently, and then he opened the door, stepping out into the corridor, the light shifting slightly as the door moved. Just before it closed, he spoke one more time, softer than before, but no less certain. "Get some rest, Emily." The use of her name lingered in the air after he was gone, the door closing with a quiet click that echoed longer than it should have, and suddenly the room felt different again, not empty, but watched in a way she could not see. Emily stood there for a moment, listening to the silence, feeling the weight of everything pressing in from all sides, and then slowly, she moved back toward the bed, sitting beside Liam once more, her hand resting lightly against his back as she stared at the object still in her hand. For the first time since she picked it up, she did not see it as something she needed to get rid of. She saw it as something that had already changed her path completely, and as she closed her fingers around it again, she realized that whatever this was, whatever it would become, she was already too far inside it to pretend she could walk away unchanged. The room did not feel quiet anymore after he left. It felt aware, like the silence itself had weight, and Emily sat there longer than she meant to, her hand still resting lightly on Liam's back, counting each breath he took as if it could slow her own. The storm outside had faded into something softer, distant now, but inside, her thoughts only grew louder, sharper, circling the same questions without answers, pulling her deeper into something she had not chosen but could no longer avoid. She looked down at the object again, turning it slowly between her fingers, studying its edges, its surface, searching for something she had missed before, and for the first time, she noticed a faint line along one side, almost invisible under the soft light, like it was not just a solid piece but something designed to open. Her breath caught slightly as she traced it with her thumb, hesitation flickering through her before curiosity pushed past it, quiet but insistent. Carefully, slowly, she pressed along the edge. And the object shifted, just enough to reveal a hidden seam, and with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have, it opened. Inside, something small and precise caught the light, a tiny drive, sleek, unmarked, but unmistakable, and Emily felt her pulse spike as realization settled in deeper, heavier, more real than anything Adrian had said. This was not just a symbol, not just leverage, it was something tangible, something that carried answers, and danger. she stared at it for a moment too long, her thoughts racing, weighing the risk of knowing against the fear of staying in the dark, and before she could fully stop herself, she glanced around the room, as if expecting someone to appear the moment she made a move. The door remained closed, the space still, and yet she could not shake the feeling that nothing here truly went unseen. Slowly, she stood, moving carefully so as not to wake Liam, her steps quiet against the carpet as she crossed to the desk near the window. Her eyes scanning it until she found what she needed, a small laptop, sleek, already powered on as if it had been prepared before she even arrived. Her hand hovered above it for a second, doubt rising again, sharper this time, because once she looked, there would be no going back, no pretending she was just a witness caught in the wrong place. She thought of Adrian's words, of the way he had said she would learn, but not tonight, and something in her resisted that, pushed against it, because waiting felt like giving up control she had just fought to keep. With a quiet breath, she inserted the drive, her fingers steady even as her heart raced, and the screen flickered slightly before a series of files appeared, names she did not recognize, codes she did not understand, but one stood out immediately, labeled with a date that matched tonight. Emily hesitated, her finger hovering over the trackpad, her pulse pounding in her ears, and for a second, she almost closed it, almost stepped back into the safety of not knowing, but then Liam shifted behind her, a soft sound that grounded her again, and something inside her settled, not calm, not certain, but resolved. She tapped the file, the screen changed, lines of information appearing, structured, detailed, and even without understanding all of it, she could see patterns, connections, names repeated in ways that did not feel accidental, and one name stood out more than the rest, appearing again and again in places that made her breath catch. Moretti. Her eyes widened slightly, her mind racing to catch up, to process what she was seeing, and for the first time since she stepped into this world, something became clear in a way that changed everything. This was not just about betrayal inside his world, it was about something built around him. Something that reached further than she could see. A quiet sound at the door made her freeze instantly, her hand hovering over the laptop as her heart slammed against her ribs, and in that single moment, one realization cut through everything else. She had just stepped into something she was never meant to see, and now, there was no way to unsee it. Emily's hand froze above the laptop, her breath caught somewhere between her chest and her throat as the soft sound at the door echoed louder than it should have, stretching the moment into something sharp and fragile. She did not move at first, her eyes still locked on the screen where the name Moretti repeated in ways that no longer felt like coincidence, but like a pattern she was never meant to recognize. The handle turned slowly, deliberate, and before she could close the laptop or pull the drive free, the door opened. Adrian stepped inside, his gaze moved immediately, not to her face, but to the desk, to the faint glow of the screen, to the position of her hand, and in that single glance, Emily knew he understood everything. The silence that followed was different now, heavier, no longer controlled by him alone, but by what she had just done. She straightened slowly, her fingers curling instinctively around the edge of the laptop as if she could shield it, even though it was too late for that. You said not tonight, she said quietly, her voice steady despite the pulse racing in her ears. Adrian closed the door behind him without looking away from her, the soft click sealing the space again, but this time it felt smaller, tighter, like the walls had shifted inward. I did, he replied, his tone calm, but there was something beneath it now, something sharper, something that had not been there before. He stepped closer, not fast, not aggressive, but with that same controlled certainty that made it impossible to ignore him, and Emily felt her breath shorten as he stopped just across from the desk, his eyes finally lifting to meet hers. And you decided to ignore that, he continued, his voice low. Emily held his gaze, refusing to look away, even as doubt flickered through her. Because backing down now would not change what she had already seen. You said I needed to understand, she answered, her voice quiet but firm. So I did not wait. Adrian's eyes searched hers, not with anger, not with surprise, but with something more complicated, something that made her chest tighten because she could not name it. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence stretching between them until it felt like it might break. Then his gaze shifted to the screen again, to the open file, to the name she could not unsee. And something in his expression changed, subtle but real. Then you saw enough, he said quietly. Emily swallowed, her grip tightening on the edge of the desk. I saw your name. The words hung in the air, heavier than anything else that had been said, and for the first time since she met him, there was a pause that did not feel controlled. Adrian exhaled slowly, his posture still, his eyes returning to hers, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter than before, but carried more weight than anything he had said that night. "You saw what someone wanted you to see," he said. Emily's brow furrowed slightly, confusion cutting through the fear. "It is your name." "Yes," Adrian replied, not denying it, not deflecting it, "and that is why it is there." The answer did not settle anything, it only made the ground beneath her feel less stable, and Emily felt her thoughts race again, trying to catch up, trying to find something solid to hold on to. "You are telling me this is not what it looks like," she said slowly. Adrian took another step closer, the distance between them narrowing, his presence filling the space again, but this time it did not feel like control, it felt like something else, something more urgent. "I am telling you," he said, his voice steady, unshaken, "that someone built this to make it look like me." Emily's breath caught, the realization hitting harder than she expected, because that meant something worse than what she had feared, something deeper, something more dangerous than a simple betrayal. Her eyes flicked back to the screen, to the repeating name, and then back to him, searching, questioning, and for the first time, she did not see certainty there, she saw something else, something human, something that made everything more complicated. "Then you are not just protecting me," she said quietly, her voice softer now, more careful. "You are trying to find who did this." Adrian held her gaze, and this time, he did not hide it. "I am," he answered. The truth settled between them, shifting everything again, changing the shape of what this was becoming, and Emily felt it in the way her grip on the object loosened slightly, not out of trust, but out of understanding. The silence returned once more, but it no longer felt like something closing in, it felt like something opening, something uncertain, something that could not be undone, and as she looked at him, really looked this time, Emily realized that the most dangerous part of this night was not what she had witnessed, it was what she had just become part of, because the moment she chose to see the truth, she stopped being someone he needed to protect, and became someone he could not afford to lose.